Hello, welcome back. Thank you for clicking on this video. Alright, so today, I'm going to explain what a distribution is, because there's a lot of talk about distros all over the internet. You look up how to use Linux, you look up how to install Linux, the first thing you're bombarded with is you have to choose the right distribution. Distribution is important. Without the right distribution, you're not going to know what you're talking about. Distribution this, distribution that. And you're like, everybody chill out. What is a distribution? Easy answer, a distribution is an operating system. But that makes it more complicated as well, because a distribution is a distribution of Linux. So what is Linux? Linux is an operating system as well, but most of the time it acts like a kernel. So to understand this, picture a layer cake, right? So if you've got a layer cake, then it's got 4 layers, okay? It's got the kernel, which is the piece of code that actually communicates with the hardware itself. Then you've got the drivers. The drivers help the top operating system code to communicate with the kernel. Then you've got the operating system layer, and then you've got the desktop environment. All this together, this layer cake is an operating system. But the third layer, and this isn't scientific, that's just my explanation of it. But so that third layer is going to be what the distribution really is. So Linus Torvalds, as we went over in the history of GNU/Linux video, is the creator of the Linux kernel. Well, he created just that, a kernel that can be built into an operating system, a kernel that can be used as an operating system by itself without a graphical user interface, without a desktop environment. So what is a distribution? A distribution is a layer that you put on top of the kernel that allows you to actually use it in an everyday non-server environment. So, what does that mean? This had to be explained to me multiple times before I understood it. None of it really made any sense to me at first. I was like, I'm just going to use Ubuntu because it's people friendly. And what I've come to the realization of is, in some ways, distributions don't matter. If you don't like something, you can change it. Don't like a desktop environment? We've been over this. You can change your desktop environment. Don't like a package manager? Cool, use a different one. Really, at the end of the day, Linux is Linux. Distribution is a starting point. That's the easiest way for me to explain it. That's not 100% correct, but that's the easiest way for me to explain it. And so, the other thing that's really important is what you're going to be doing. So if you're brand new to Linux, 3 distributions come to mind immediately. It's going to be Ubuntu, Fedora, and Linux Mint. Ubuntu, if you're like, I want to get into Linux, I would say probably Fedora would be the best beginner OS if you want to be a little bit challenged. Ubuntu is also going to challenge you some. You can definitely be challenged in Ubuntu, but you don't have to be challenged in Ubuntu. The Linux Mint is very Windows-esque. That's going to be comfortable for you. Everything's kind of provided for you, step-by-step kind of thing. very easy. Probably don't even have to look at the terminal kind of deal. So that's three distributions there. Then there's Arch Linux. Arch Linux is, in air quotes, the Linux veterans operating system. You've been using Linux for, going on a year now. You're probably going to start dabbling in Arch because of some of its features. The reason Linux veterans like Arch is because of its package manager and its repositories, the AUR repositories and the Arch Wiki. Both things are very detailed, and the repository has just about any application you're ever going to want. No compiling from source required. Get it set up the first time, and you're good, kind of deal. Manjaro, a lot of people that want to go to Arch start with Manjaro. It's based off of Arch Linux. It uses the Arch Linux repositories, and that's a pretty easy thing to use. For a more advanced, just as an example, there are other distributions though, and there's literally like thousands of them, and you could build your own distribution with a little bit of time and knowledge. So just to go over a few more off the top of my head, Elementary OS is another one. Not really sure what their stick is. Never really looked into it. I just know this one as an example. Pop! OS is really good for gaming. That's their whole stick. It's like, hey, you're a Linux user, but you're a gamer too. Pop! OS. And it's based off of Ubuntu, so it uses all of Ubuntu's things that make Ubuntu great. And then another veteran OS is going to be Debian. Debian doesn't get a lot of love. Debian doesn't get a lot of attention anymore. It used to be the number one distribution. It was the biggest distribution. But Ubuntu is actually based off of Debian. To this day, they still look to Debian as their source. So that's kind of interested in the whole Debian family. So when you say something is Ubuntu based, it's also Debian based by default. And it still uses that .deb packaging. The package manager that they use is Debian. So the Debian team provides support to many companies and many distributions for its use. And that's kind of the whole thing with distributions is, honestly, the main difference between distributions is going to be your package manager and your desktop environment. So the package manager being, how you install apps, and then which apps are compatible with which things. So there's going to be really the big three that we talked about earlier, which is going to be the .deb, .rpm, and then Arch stuff. .deb supporting any Debian-based or Ubuntu-based system. .rpm being for Fedora and kind of the Fedora family of OSs, and it has its own line of OSs as well, just the same as Ubuntu does. And then Arch, Manjaro. I was on DistroWatch a couple hours ago, and I saw another, I think it said Archman or something, and it was also a spin-off of Arch. So yeah, don't get too up and frantic about having to try all the different distributions and, I have to run all these different distributions if I want to be able. No, you don't have to do that. It does definitely force you to explore the different avenues of Linux this project as a whole has kind of forced me to explore different avenues of Linux that I wasn't used to before, but distributions really don't matter all too much because in the end, like I said, it is really, the best way to explain it is a kickoff point. How far into the kickoff point do you want to be? If you're a beginner and you're like, I want to be into Linux and I'm going to go further into it in the future, but right now I just want to be on Linux because I'm tired of Microsoft. I don't want to deal with my privacy concerns with Microsoft. Okay, Ubuntu. A lot of people compare Canonical, which is the company that produces Ubuntu, to Microsoft, and they call Canonical Linux's Microsoft, but I mean, it's all up to you. So that's why a lot of people start with Mint or Fedora instead of Ubuntu, or that's why a lot of Linux kind of, if you've been in Linux for a while but you're still not comfortable with the idea of going to Arch, maybe you use Fedora or Mint, like I was saying earlier. But I mean, and then there's the distributions that say if it's not open source, then it's not going to be on here. So even NVIDIA graphics drivers. So if you have a computer with an NVIDIA card in it, then this operating system is not going to work with it because it won't support the NVIDIA graphics driver. So, I mean, distributions, they vary, but in the end, they're all the same thing. Most of the time, they have some sort of stick that they're like, this is going to be the last OS you ever need. Is it? Probably not. If we're being realistic, it's always nice, especially in the professional world, to have a laptop laying around in the corner somewhere with Windows 10 on it so you can pop on your Windows 10 right quick and get something done just because you need to get it done and you're not trying to get fired. So, are you going to find a distribution that's going to be the last distribution you ever need, the last operating system you ever need? Probably not. Probably not. Personally, I still use Windows 10. As you know, these videos have been filmed on virtual machines inside of Windows 10, which is ironic for me because I used to do it the opposite way. But there you go. I mean, it's just a matter of a starting point and which side of the Linux family you're on. Are you on the Fedora side or are you on the Debian side? And then Arch is kind of over here in its own world, but it definitely has another side to it. But yeah, I mean, you can make it just as complicated as you want, or you can choose a distribution that you'll never even open the terminal. So at the end of the day, Linux is Linux, and if you choose to dip your toes into the Linux world, then we say welcome. Thank you for watching. I hope that was enjoyable and informational, and good morning, good afternoon, good night. I don't know what time it is. Thank you for watching. Peace out.